Good evening, Insight Circle people. Welcome. Tonight we'll be discussing more than just the card reading challenge. I was going to try to deviate just a little bit from our usual of giving a spread and more go into somewhat of a tutorial. For those of you that are a little more experienced, this may be boring. Feel free to sift through the video as you will. Tonight, we will be showing off the Sun and Moon Tarot. It's a very beautiful tarot by Vanessa Decanates. I believe that she would probably just, as an American, would probably go with that Decanates, but I want to do almost the Decor or Decanates or something. My French is terrible. But it's a beautiful deck. Show off a few cards here. So like here is the Judgment card. It's got this almost Rastafarian world view with kind of a tempera or a chalk art style texture to it all. Again, the camera is not really great at picking up the nuance of the cards. It really is an experience unto itself. And you might notice some of the terms, names, and symbolism from the Thoth Tarot, for those that are familiar with that. I hear people refer to it as the Thoth Tarot, but technically if we were turning that first TH, we'd be doing it with both, considering that my understanding is that Thoth was the Greek version of Dejuti, or Dehuti, or Jahuti. There's a couple different variants of the Egyptian god of knowledge. See, it's just a very nice deck. But no matter what you call the deck, because I'm sure that as good British people that founded the original version of the Thoth Tarot, it was probably very much Thoth, not Toth, but I could be wrong. There are people that give it a lot of lip service as the Thoth Tarot, but this deck has some deviations from that, so this is kind of a mix of the usual based off of that one or the Rider-Waite. So it's just a beautiful deck. Now, before we get on into some of the tutorial, I do actually want to bring up something that we were talking about in a different video, besides my pendulum there. We did talk about the different codes within the tarot, and that there was actually astrology in the tarot that discussed 3 of the numbered cards belonging to Aries. So, the 3 cards, and I'll explain why. And this goes part to the tutorial. So, well, I'll sift them out here, right? The 2, 3, and 4 of Wands. Now, in the tarot, there's 3 basic sections. Let me get out a card from each. So this would be an example of from the suit cards of the minor arcana. Now, the terms for minor and major arcana, as best I understand, were done by a particular person called Elias Levi. There's a great corpus of information on that particular occultist, and I really encourage a deep dive into that information. So, here, the King of Cups is another part of the minor arcana. They're part of the, I call them the court cards. Some people call them the trump cards. Ever since we had a particular president, I have not been wanting to call them that, for good reasons. But, politics aside, the court cards, there's only 16 of them. Those familiar with the European practice, the divination practice called geomancy, which is not related to feng shui at all, which is also often called geomancy. The geomancy in Europe was actually just another divination system that was based off of anything that could create odds or evens. What that has to do with anything is that they referred to a book of sand when they were referring to geomancy, like there was some sort of oral tradition that named each of the symbols that was created by having a certain series of odds and evens. You don't really have to know a whole lot about that at the moment, but it does make an interesting thought that in medieval Europe they took to this and ascribed all sorts of astrological and it's a very strict oracle of sorts. So understanding that there is potentially some of that symbolism stuck in the cards, the court cards, is intriguing, and it goes based on element paired with element. So with kings, of all the flavors in the court cards, they're whatever the element of the suit is, combined with fire. So this would be fire of water, for instance. Now, the major arcana, there's only 22 cards, and here is a good example of one of them, the Empress. They're kind of archetypal, and what I mean by that is that they're very symbolic. Now, 22, for those of you that are in a very nerdy headspace, especially for occultism, European occultism was filled with this obsession with Jewish implements and mysticism. One of the biggest contributions to medieval European, especially European Christian mystical traditions, was their intake of Kabbalah, which is Jewish mysticism. So 22 cards for the 22 letters of the alphabet. There was a book in which was very prized on the treatise of Kabbalah. And I may not be pronouncing it appropriately, but Sefer Yetzirah. But what's important about those letters and how they came to get the symbolism for the cards is that with each of the Hebrew letters of their alphabet, they had a symbolism for each one based upon their first appearance in the early parts of the Torah, in the very first chapters of the Torah, called, well, we interpret it as Genesis. It literally means the beginning if you read it in the original Hebrew. I believe the word is Bereshit, but I could be wrong. In any case, the idea for just everyday tarot people is that those 22 cards are special. They're kind of almost like the power card. So with the different numbered cards, the suit cards in the minor arcana, there's 10 of each, and that also comes from Kabbalah, the structure of it, 1 through 10 representing one of the 10 spheres on the tree of life. They're like experiences in different frames of human existence. So for instance, in the Two of Wands, here is referring to a point of self-mastery and self-control. But especially when it comes down to if you are able to master yourself, you're also able to master your enemy. I think that's kind of what it's striking at there with the two Boken in hand with the person with the yin yang on the yin yang. I'm sorry, on their back. Yin yang, not yin yang. But a lot of people will refer to it as that. It's actually it's the Wuji symbol. Wuji is just that little yin yang symbol, representing that the infinite unity in it that has a duality in it, and each one reflecting, no matter what form you, man or woman, masculine or feminine, anything always has a little bit of the other in it. The Three of Wands would be that kind of state where you're able to gain skills, and here virtue could be thought of as virtue as in like by the virtue of what they're doing right or performing. The Four of Wands, it says completion, but really lots of times more often this is about making the efforts, and that it's at a point where there's a certain celebration that you've come to a certain level of mastery. And with fire, earth, air, and water, they all have a different take. So it's a little hard to explain, but it is something a lot like if you were seeing the world through the lens of one of those four elements, and then you go through the different levels on the tree of life. The levels on the tree of life deal with its closeness to manifestation. So 10 is at its most closeness to manifestation, and 1 is at its most potential, still residing in the sphere of divine unity. That's a bit of the spirituality. So people just bear with me, okay? Obviously we have manifestations of things throughout that happen in our existence, but it's showing kind of where the element plays out. And lots of times earth and water are much better at dealing with manifesting closer and closer to the plane of common existence. What that means for most lay people is that with the 1 through 10, it's talking about situations. And the major arcana is talking about themes in those situations. And the court cards are referring to us, the actors, in those situations. So now that we've really gotten some headspace, there is also the fact that there's breakdowns of astrology throughout all of the tarot. Each and every part has some aspect of astrology in it. The major arcana are more split up amongst spelling out signs and planets, and usually aren't as good at articulating astrology. They just have astrological symbolism. Because the major arcana is much more about the journey than it is the framework and language of astrology, whereas the 1 through 10, minus the ace, or the 1 of any element, it goes through 2 through 10, and it goes through each of the decanates of each sign. So for the 2 through 4, it's referring to Aries. So here's our Hamal, here's our Sheraton, and the other small star. So for those that remember the last spread that we did, we have those. Yep, those cards are connected. For those who haven't already subscribed, please do subscribe and give me a thumbs up. Till next time, namaste.